The detective slid the report across the table like it weighed nothing. A single manila folder, a few typed pages, and inside those pages, the word that would crack Bianca DeSouza's composure wide open. She stared at it. You could see the exact second it registered. Not the words, not the clinical language, not the cold medical formality of it all, but that one word, sitting there at the top of the page like a verdict already written. Homicide. She looked up. That's not what homicide means. She said it quietly at first, like correcting a stranger who'd mispronounced her name. Then she said it again, louder, and the words started to blur together because the tears came fast. And what followed was the kind of breakdown that doesn't perform itself for cameras. It collapsed inward. It rattled. Her whole body seemed to shrink under the fluorescent lights of that interrogation room. She was 19 years old. The detective didn't flinch. He had seen this before, the disbelief, the bargaining with reality. The moment someone realizes the story they told themselves in private is being replaced by the story the evidence tells in public. He waited for her to breathe. Then he said it plainly. Cause of death, traumatic asphyxia. Manner of death, homicide. Because a baby had been born alive. A baby who cried. A baby who breathed. And a baby who died not from some sudden, unpreventable catastrophe, but from the simple, terrible arithmetic of no one doing anything. This is the case of Bianca R. DeSouza, a 19-year-old woman from West Boca Raton, Florida, with a bipolar disorder diagnosis, PTSD, a history of childhood sexual abuse, an IQ of 80, and a prescription for Lexapro she had stopped taking 2 weeks before the worst day of her life. A woman who spent her pregnancy dancing in clubs to survive, who mixed Xanax with oxycodone to get through the nights, who reached out to adoption agencies, and then quietly stopped answering their calls. A woman who gave birth alone in her bedroom on a Tuesday afternoon and then took a shower. A baby boy was born in that room. He cried for 10 minutes, and then he went silent, and we are going to walk through every second of how it happened. Welcome to Blood Betrayal Files. In today's case, a mother, a newborn, and 10 minutes of crying that changed everything. Before we get into it, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We want to know. Now, let's get into it. Go back to May 2, 2022. A Tuesday, West Boca Raton, Florida. A beige residential street in the 11,900 block of Coral Place where nothing about the neighborhood tells you anything about what is happening inside one particular bedroom. It is 4:56 in the afternoon when Nicole Presnell, Bianca's mother, pushes open the front door after her shift. She calls out. No answer. She walks toward the back of the house. She opens the bedroom door. What she sees ends her. She starts screaming. The 911 call she makes in the next 60 seconds is one of the most disturbing pieces of audio to come out of Palm Beach County in recent memory. Not because of the screaming, though she is screaming. Not because of the raw, unfiltered panic of a grandmother who has just walked into something no human being should walk into, but because of the other voice on the line. Nicole is yelling that the baby is dead. She is yelling it at the dispatcher. She is yelling it into the air. She is yelling it at God or whoever else might be listening. And underneath her voice, calm as still water, is Bianca. If you would just be quiet for 5 seconds. That was what she said to her mother. Not help him. Not I'm sorry. Not I didn't know what to do. She told her mother to be quiet. When paramedics arrived, they found the newborn still warm. He was inside a pair of boxer shorts, one leg hole wrapped around his torso, his face pressed against his mother's thigh from hours earlier, a red, fuzzy blanket tucked around him. The umbilical cord was still attached. He had never been unwrapped, repositioned, cleaned, or held. He had simply been left. CPR was performed at the scene. He was rushed to West Boca Medical Center. He was pronounced dead. Bianca was found on the couch. Responders described her as unresponsive, moving mechanically, as though her body was running on some kind of diminished autopilot. She couldn't speak clearly. She couldn't account for the hours. She was Baker acted that evening, taken involuntarily for psychiatric evaluation, because the people in that room could not tell whether they were looking at a perpetrator or a patient. That question would haunt this case for the next 3.5 years. To understand what happened on May 2nd, 2022, you have to go back much further. Back to a childhood that most people reading psychology textbooks would struggle to believe was assigned to a single person. Bianca was born in 2003. By the time she was 8 or 9 years old, her older brother had begun sexually abusing her. This wasn't a one-time event. It was sustained. It was something she lived inside of, probably telling herself what children in that situation always tell themselves, that it was normal, that it was her fault, that it would stop. It did not stop. Her mother, Nicole, was not a safe harbor. Reports describe Bianca's fear of physical abuse at home severe enough that she was removed by the Department of Children and Families and placed with her father. Her father's home was not safer. The abuse there, by multiple accounts, continued in different forms. She was hospitalized for suicidal ideation before she turned 14. By the time she was supposed to be taking 10th grade exams, she had dropped out of high school entirely. She attempted her GED multiple times. She failed. Her tested IQ was 80, a number that sits at the lower edge of the average range, and tells you something about the tools she had available to process a world that had been catastrophically unkind to her. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. She was diagnosed with PTSD. She was prescribed Lexapro. She was doing what a lot of young women in her position do when the institutions that are supposed to protect them have failed so completely. She was surviving. Exotic dancing, sex work, an unstable boyfriend named Chris, who was wearing an ankle monitor for stabbing someone, who was in and out of her life the way violent men tend to be. She also had a husband, or someone she referred to that way, who was reportedly military, deployed, and largely absent. When she discovered she was pregnant, she made calls. She reached out to adoption agencies. She described wanting to find the right family, the right situation, something that would give this baby a life she was not capable of giving. The agencies responded. Arrangements were discussed. She had an induction scheduled at the hospital for May 3rd, the very next day after everything fell apart. But in the weeks leading up to the birth, she stopped answering their calls. Throughout the pregnancy, she had been using Xanax. She had been using oxycodone, prescribed to her after a car accident, but taken in combinations that her body and her baby's body absorbed together. Marijuana, alcohol, vaping. The night before she gave birth, she reported seizures. She had stopped taking her Lexapro 2 weeks prior. Her body was a chemistry experiment conducted in the dark, and her baby was living inside that experiment, taking everything. In May 2nd, 2022, 6:30 in the morning, Nicole leaves for work. Bianca says goodbye. The door closes. The house goes quiet. What happens in the hours between is known almost entirely through Bianca's own words. The words she gave to investigators in that interrogation room nearly 20 months later, and even allowing for the gaps, the contradictions, the places where her memory collapses into static, a picture still forms. A picture that is hard to look at directly. She lay in bed. She scrolled Instagram. She felt cramps she described as a 10 out of 10, the kind that make you punch a wall, which she did. She did not call anyone. She did not call her mother. She did not call the hospital. She did not call the adoption agency whose number she had saved in her phone. She punched the wall and lay back down. Sometime in the afternoon, she gave birth alone in her bedroom. She was wearing boxer shorts. The baby emerged through one of the leg holes. He was full term. He was alive. He cried. 10 minutes by most accounts. A normal newborn cry, not distress, not a scream, just the sound of lungs discovering air for the first time. 10 minutes of sound that announced a life. Bianca's own description of what she did during those 10 minutes is among the most haunting things to appear in any court document in this case. She sat there. She said her mind went blank. She said her body stopped working. She said she didn't know what to do, so she did nothing, and watching him, she felt afraid. Not afraid for him, afraid to touch him. She pulled the umbilical cord and the sack out herself. She moved him next to her on the bed. She pulled the red, fuzzy blanket up to his chin. And then she did something that has become central to how this case is understood by everyone who has followed it. She got up, went to the bathroom, and took a shower. She came back. She scrolled Instagram again. The baby was already silent by this point, already beyond the reach of CPR, beyond the reach of anything. She lay down in her mother's bed and waited. When investigators later examined the scene, they found evidence in the positioning. The baby had been lying with part of his body still inside the shorts, one leg through the leg hole, his face pressed against the fabric, against the surface beneath it. The pressure marks they found, the petechiae, the tiny burst blood vessels scattered across his scalp, his neck, his shoulders, his chest, mapped almost exactly to where the fabric had been, to the compression, to the weight of nothing being done. She had told investigators that the blanket was pulled up to his chin. Later, under continued questioning, she admitted it might have been over his face. She couldn't be sure. He was born alive. He breathed. He cried. And the only adult who could have helped him did nothing while he struggled against a pair of boxer shorts on a bedroom mattress in West Boca Raton. The Interrogation Room, December 2023. 19 months after the fact. The detective was patient. That's the thing about experienced homicide investigators, they don't need to yell. The evidence does that for them. He walked Bianca through the timeline piece by piece. The blanket, the shorts, the position of the baby when her mother found him, the position of the baby as described by paramedics, by the medical examiner, by the photographs taken at the scene. The first version of her story placed the blanket at the baby's chin. When asked again, she said she wasn't sure. When pressed about whether it could have been over his face, she said maybe. When the detective pointed out that the petechiae, those small, unmistakable pressure marks on the skin, were consistent specifically with something pressing against the posterior scalp, the back of the neck, the upper shoulders and chest, she didn't have an answer. She said she didn't know. He asked her about rolling over. She said no. He asked about a pillow. She said no. He asked about a hand. She said no. He asked about whether she had ever put anything over the baby's face. She said no. But the evidence was not constructed around her denials. It was constructed around what her own body had produced and what it had done, or failed to do, in the space of those critical hours. The Palm Beach County medical examiner examined the infant and returned a ruling that landed like a stone. Homicide by asphyxia. The mechanism was dual, airway obstruction combined with chest compression. The manner of death was homicide not because the examiner alleged anyone reached out a hand to kill. The manner was homicide because the circumstances of the death, the positioning, the confinement in the shorts, the fabric against the face, the hours of inaction, were not accidental. A baby in distress had been left in that distress. No one intervened. No one called for help. Bianca's own words came back into the room with her. "I still hear him crying," she told investigators. "I just didn't know what to do." The detective pointed out, gently but without softness, that there were people she could have called: her mother, an ambulance, the hospital where she was scheduled to deliver the next day, any human being within reach of a phone. And the toxicology report sat alongside everything else. The baby's system showed oxycodone metabolites and caffeine. Both passed through the placenta during gestation. He had arrived into the world already carrying what his mother had taken. The substances she had consumed throughout the pregnancy hadn't killed him, but they are part of the full accounting of what this child was given before he even had the chance to be given anything at all. "I'm mad," Bianca told investigators, "that I could just let my body stop working." It was perhaps the most honest thing she said in that room. February 2026, Palm Beach County Circuit Court. Judge Sarah Willis sat at the bench and faced a case that, by her own description, had no clean answer. a dead baby, a mother with a lifetime of documented trauma, a prosecution that wanted prison, a defense that wanted treatment, a public that wanted something to make sense. It had taken over 3 years to reach this moment. Bianca had been arrested in December 2023, charged with aggravated manslaughter of a child and child neglect causing great bodily harm, both first-degree felonies carrying a combined maximum of roughly 45 years. In December 2025, she entered an open guilty plea. No deal, no negotiated sentence. She stood before the court and said she was guilty. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney Mathri Thanikadu, asked for approximately 8 years in prison. They acknowledged the mental health history. They acknowledged the trauma. They acknowledged that remorse had been expressed. But they argued what the criminal code demands to be argued. That punishment is not optional when a child dies and a person capable of preventing it chose inaction. They also noted her compliance issues after arrest, leaving programs, leaving supervision. The defense, led by attorney Elizabeth Ramsey alongside forensic psychologist Dr. Gretchen Moy, argued something different. They argued that Bianca had never, in her entire life, received the kind of sustained, intensive mental health treatment that her diagnoses required. That what happened on May 2nd was the product of untreated trauma, meeting an impossibly fractured nervous system, dissociation, not indifference. That prison would not fix what prison had never been designed to fix. That this was her first real opportunity to be treated instead of warehoused. Bianca spoke at sentencing. She said she was sorry. She said she took full responsibility. It was not the first time she had said it. She had stood at her son's funeral, according to reports, and said, "I'm sorry," until the words wore themselves out. Judge Willis sentenced her to 10 years of probation. Time served, 137 days. No prison. She was ordered directly into a 12 to 18-month inpatient women's rehabilitation facility in Roswell, New Mexico, with no access to phones or the internet during treatment. After completion, medication management, random drug testing, part-time employment or school enrollment, or documented proof of 10 job applications per month, and $1,209 in court costs due by August 2027. A later motion by the state corrected the record. She is now formally adjudicated. She is a convicted felon. That part of the record is sealed into her name permanently. In Palm Beach County, there are other cases for comparison. A woman whose newborn was found in a dumpster. Another case, the one that got referred to as Baby June. Those women are serving years, a decade or more. Their cases are similar in their bones. Newborn alone, no help call, death by circumstances that a phone call might have stopped. Whether the outcomes reflect justice or two different judges reading the same tragedy through different lenses is a question this county has not finished answering. What is not in question is this. A baby boy was born on May 2nd, 2022, in a bedroom in West Boca Raton. He was full term. He was healthy. He cried for 10 minutes to announce himself to a world that never got the chance to know him. His name was not published in public records. The world knows him mostly through legal documents, through the autopsy findings, through the clinical language of petechiae and asphyxia and homicide. He was alive. He deserved every second beyond those 10 minutes, and he got none of them because his mother just sat there. If this case affected you, subscribe to Blood Betrayal Files, hit the bell, and drop your verdict in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in the kind of justice this baby never received, share this video. Let it be heard.